All right, all right. How is everybody doing? Hello, everyone. We have an awesome spaces plan for today. We're going to be talking about investing in the metaverse. It's crazy to think that this is our 18th episode of the Hideout, but this is a particularly special one. I'm happy to have a few of my friends on here who are definitely very knowledgeable investors in the space, and then a few that we are going to be learning about and learning about all the amazing things they're doing in the space. So I am going to let everybody introduce themselves, but I will go in a particular order. And then a reminder that we're going to be doing a giveaway towards the end of this hour. So please hang around and you'll have a chance to win an 8 Mil Army avatar. So let's start with Jihan. Jihan, can you introduce yourself quickly? Thanks for jumping on. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate being here. Really quickly, I'm Jahan. I'm from Kinetic. Founded Kinetic in 2016, where we're the earliest VCs in Asia focused on blockchain. I've been an art dealer, used to work at Sotheby's. I'm the crypto advisor to Christie's globally, active collector in NFTs, investor in some metaverses, like early investor in Decentraland and Yuga Labs, and just really happy to see the space grow. Thanks.
Amazing, amazing. Really excited to get into your experience here. How about Sashi from Polygon Labs? Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Sachi. I joined Polygon about a year and a half ago. That was right when Sandeep was, setting up this ecosystem fund. It's a 100 million size fund focused on investing in high quality projects and founders that are building on Polygon. So that's across DeFi, NFT marketplaces, consumer applications, gaming, etc. So super excited to be here and thank you for hosting this.
Amazing. Really excited to get into your perspective from kind of the blockchain and developer side, because there's so much that we do, I think, and we're working on Polygon as well. So I definitely love to hear, and I've already seen all the crazy amazing things you guys are doing, especially in the world of gaming. So definitely excited to get into that. How about Abdullah? Can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Abdullah. I am a investor at Arana Ventures. We are a smaller fund located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we have two vehicles that we're currently working on. One of them is just a fund of funds. The second one is just a secondary market investment portfolio where we try to find undervalued, like microcaps, midcap coins, and then I also work at Blockchain at Michigan as the governance lead there. So we are pretty large delegates for a couple of DeFi protocols, including Uniswap, Compound, and Aave. So that's just a quick overview.
Amazing. Really excited to get into your experience here too. Let's have Danny from Ready Player DAO.
Hey everyone, great to be here. Thanks for having me on behalf of Ready Player DAO. My name is Danny Carpio. I'm a co-founder on the founding team of Ready Player DAO. We're a Web3 gaming organization focusing on community content and investment. We started maybe over 18 months ago. I'm on the core team there, and I work basically across the entire organization. Over the last year, we have been focused more on Web3 user scale through traditional content marketing strategies. And so I've been working there with Rich Cabrera and a couple of folks on our team to really help bring Web2 native creators into Web3, which was a challenge, but we were able to do that with Mystic 7 and Ali Straza. And we're bringing them into Web3 gaming and helping grow Web3 native gaming creators so that the Web3 gaming space can leverage traditional gaming video content strategies within their user acquisition strategies. And so I work day in and day out building those strategies for Ready Player DAO. And I also have a a service style called Thing3, where I support just broader Web3 native professionals.
Thank you, Danny. And we love Ready Player DAO at Satoshiverse. So super excited to have you here and talk a little bit about the approach you guys are taking. And then I think the last person we have on the panel is Lauren. Lauren, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. I started out in the entertainment industry, went off to run acquisitions at Microsoft, so tech and entertainment are the backbone of what we do. I run a privately held fund called Shake and Bake Productions, where we invest in pretty much everything except for politics. So we have a vertical in film and television, and have made movies like Hacksaw Ridge and Lone Survivor, a division in biotech, taking companies public like Vaccinity, and a lot in gaming, Web3, blockchain, and consumer, as well as invest in other funds that focus in the space. Some of the bigger investments that you might know about are companies like Build a Rocket Boy, which was started by Leslie Benzies, investors in Galaxy, OneUp, Pantera, Hashgraph. And we like to see the merger of what's happening between Web3, entertainment, and the whole ecosystem coming together finally. So thanks for having me. Looking forward to the chat.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. And last but certainly not least, our host, Spencer. Give a quick introduction of yourself and let's jump into the question.
Hey, yeah, my name is Spencer Vogel. I've been involved with Web3 and NFTs since 2017 and been with Apollo Entertainment and the Satoshiverse for about a year and a half working on the business and strategy side of things. So I'm going to be hosting and asking the questions today. So we'll start off with a couple questions open to the group to everyone. I'll call on someone to start and then feel free to just jump in from there. And then I have some individual questions for each of you as well. And then a couple more questions for the group at the end if we have time as well. So getting into it, the first question is, what are the current metas and notable trends you're tracking in the Web3 space right now? And maybe Jehan, you could start us off.
Yeah, and just I guess in Web3 generally, I tend to be a little bit of a contrarian when it comes to this question because having a little bit of a macro view on things, I feel like one of the biggest trends that's starting to come up, especially in the wake of FTX, Luna, 3AC, and also what seems to be like the ultimate end game from the government to try and shut down crypto, are narratives of hybrid approaches to crypto, which include not necessarily the full decentralized future that we were promised, but something in between, where you have centralized platforms, enterprise platforms who are incorporating elements or instruments of decentralized tools, whether they are DeFi or gaming or NFTs, but really inside of their centralized platforms and inside of their kind of incumbent audiences. In addition, on our side, we're actually developing, one of our portfolio companies is developing a platform called the Spartan Network in the US, which is basically a non-cryptocurrency blockchain environment. So what we're starting to see, I think, from our side, is an expansion of the narrative from pure decentralized cryptocurrency enabled to different variations of blockchain technology, which appeal to enterprise and government, which remove cryptocurrency as a prerequisite, but still offer some of the benefits of decentralization, offer some of the benefits of interoperability, anonymity, and open source. So I would say that's one of the biggest overarching themes is it's no longer just about the crypto-enabled future, the future where you can use dApps and pay stablecoins or pay credit card in more of a SaaS model, I think is one which is probably going to grow over time.
Nice, thanks. Maybe Sachi, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this for the past couple of months. I think there's a problem with Web3, which is, there's not enough users in Web3. Like if you look at the top 10 games on Polygon, the top 10 games has like maybe 10,000 or so monthly active users. And, if you compare that to, some of the top games like Minecraft, the numbers just don't compare. I think Web3 needs a lot more users, which is why I'm focusing more so on consumer applications. I've been focusing on looking at like decentralized social type projects. Like some examples include Lens or Farcaster. I think what Jihan mentioned about payments is also very relevant. I don't think we have like a PayPal equivalent within Web3, but PayPal back in the days in 2000s, onboarded millions of users, and I think we also need that within crypto. Yeah, in regards to what the fund, Polygon Ventures is looking at broadly, we've been focusing more so on infrastructure type deals, because right now it's really hard to see what the trends are. A year ago, I would say it was pretty clear, like, gaming was really hot, or DeFi was also really hot. But right now, I think it makes more sense to focus on investing on the infrastructure layer, and then, once it makes sense, we have the flexibility to pivot quickly. So yeah, personally, I'm focusing on like consumer type applications. The fund itself is, I would say, more biased towards infrastructure type projects.
No, that makes a ton of sense. It sounds like there's kind of this theme, right, of decentralization on a spectrum, and building the tools so that Web2 onboarding and traditional companies can find, the pieces of Web3 that work for them. And, from our perspective, that's kind of the model we're building our game and our project on, is this idea that in order for this to be successful, we need to recruit hundreds of thousands of players to play the game, and not just rely on, a handful of players who can, afford to pay $1,000 or $1,500 for an avatar just to get some benefits within an ecosystem. That ecosystem needs a ton of people to exist and flourish. And so, we're thinking about this a lot on the development side as well, and how we can kind of create different layers to our experience so that the entire experience can be had, or at least a big chunk of it, without blockchain capabilities, but that the true, things that we really believe blockchain does for gaming, a la in digital asset ownership, right? True ownership, a la the ability to track progression on the blockchain, those types of things, which really, they exist to an extent, but we're doing a lot of the work developing that infrastructure ourselves so that, it will work. But I think that all kind of follows that same theme of building something that, works for everybody, but that slowly kind of introduces, consumers or businesses to the parts of blockchain that work for them, and really, enable it. And exactly that, this hybrid product. So that resonates, really well with me.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in here because this is kind of what I was going to mention of the stuff that I'm looking at. And I love that you said that, because ultimately I think what Sachi said and what you said, that is one of the main things I think I'm looking for, and what I think the industry is looking for, is this net new audience, right? And building strategies to capture them, which includes meeting them where they are, right? Consumers have existing consumer behavior, and there's a lot of demand for their attention, and the scaled audiences don't want to figure out crypto necessarily, right? And so I think finding ways to abstract that away, and go reach in for net new audience for real, like global scale of Web3 within all the products that we use. I think that's something that a lot of folks are trying to accomplish, and that can be whether that's at the base infrastructure level for the chains, the ecosystems, L1s and L2s, or whether that's for the games or the products that are built on top of that. Ultimately, nothing will work if people don't use it. And so I think maybe that's something that during the bull, folks kind of ignored, but that now has really come to the forefront. And I'm seeing that across every space that I touch, which is a lot through Think3, whether that's venture DAOs, gaming, photography, film, everyone's trying to solve, I think, those issues really is how do we get these net new audiences, and what do those strategies and models look like? And then how do we abstract that away so that it's seamless, and people get the true benefits of Web3?
Yeah, I can hop in on this as well. So it's very much the similar vein for what we're looking at. Um, the issue with a lot of these decentralized products is that the user experience and the effectiveness is multiple X worse, and it has to be multiple X better. We're seeing a lot of hybrid models popping up. Like, for example, one thing that really intrigues me is using a compute model that's hybrid. So let me give you an example here. So there are a couple of products out there, like hybrid compute from Boba Network, which is an Ethereum L2. And hybrid compute effectively allows you to utilize Web2 APIs and connect them to smart contracts. So effectively, you can run a program, or like say a complicated game program, like a mechanics and all of that, all of the algorithms can be run off chain effectively. And you connect that to a smart contract, and that smart contract is sort of the economic layer that overlays the game itself. And that's completely on chain. So you're taking all the hard work that simply can't be done on chain because everything is clunkier when it's on chain. It simply doesn't work from a data storage standpoint, from a usability standpoint. And you're taking that stuff, putting it off chain because it works in that model. Same thing with AI, like the integration of AI with things with on-chain mechanisms. It's very clunky. Like a lot of these tokens that have been hyped up recently, a lot of them have no founding or ground whatsoever. And it's largely because the compute itself has to be done off-chain. So you can run these algorithms off-chain, but then add some sort of layer on top that makes the product 10x better. Those are the types of investments we're really looking for, and those are the products that are likely going to succeed. And Boba's hybrid compute is one of those examples that could potentially work in that vein. But I'm not saying this is the exact product that would work, but something similar that starts to be established in the future. I think that could take a lot of a stronghold with future products and what we're building. I think Chainlink has a couple of models coming out from this as well, because Oracle infrastructure is very much tied to connecting on and off chain work. And I think some of their compute models that they're sort of working on the sideline, that's going to be very interesting for us to look at as well. But anything that allows for the work itself, the heavy load, to be done not on chain but off chain, I think those sorts of games and projects or trading platforms will likely start rising. Will do a lot better in the coming future. Until we can start putting everything on chain once things become more effective and efficient. But right now we have to relegate it to like a hybrid model. It's simply because that's where the tech really is right now.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more on that one. You know, one of the examples I could give is we've been having this, discussion internally about dynamic metadata and a lot of the things that we want to accomplish with the game. What we truly believe will set Web3 games apart and eventually make Web3 a new standard isn't necessarily that everything is being done on chain, but that certain important, features are being tracked within the metadata. Certain important features like, item ownership are being tracked through the use of NFTs. So I would say that, many of the processes that we're creating and kind of, experimenting on is exactly what you just said. Using AI, using metadata, dynamic metadata, but centralizing a lot of those components for the time being, keeping those on our back end, using the best of technology that already exists, and then taking those key components where the infrastructure is already built out, and we feel that it's going to sustain, because I think that's the other issue with investing a ton of resources into developing on-chain practices for everything and processes, is that there could be a new standard that's invented that just makes whatever process you created obsolete. And so for us, our balance is being struck, I think, with a real amount of work in making sure that we're using these state-of-the-art procedures off chain and taking the best of the gaming industry and what's available from an AI perspective, and then putting those things that we believe are just fundamental to an on-chain experience and really benefits the consumer on chain. So I think that was very well put. I don't think I could agree more.
Lauren, you have anything to add on this question about the trends or metas you're seeing right now before we move on to the next question?
Well, I think the piece that we're all missing here, because everybody on this call is far more intelligent than I am, is that a lot of the technology that's built on the back end, the user doesn't want to see. Like when you go to up to an ATM and you're getting money out of it, you don't want to know about the algorithm that went into actually spitting out your cash. You just want your cash. When you're making a movie, you don't really need to know how the lens works in order for the shot to be done. Some people do, some people don't. But the technologies that are being created right now to make the experience of making any kind of content more seamless, more usable for anybody, regardless of what you understand the technology to be, is the piece where there's a tipping point, where all of a sudden, a phone is something everybody has because everybody knows how to use it, not because they knew how to put it together and create the algorithm to build it, but because it was just something very easy. And I think that what blockchain and Web3 and AI, all these pieces should allow us to do, number one thing it should allow us to do is make the things we love to do easier and more fun and more accessible. And so that's the part that I would like to focus on and what we look at and investing in, because that's what helps make great content, great games, and great experiences, great inventions, great biotechnology.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. And while I got you up here speaking, I'll leave this next question for you to start with as well. So are you still seeing investment interest in Web3 and Metaverse companies in this bear market, especially given everything that's going on with FTX and kind of crypto contagion and, a lot of fear in the markets recently? And what do you think is holding potential investors back right now?
I think what's happening is clearly there's a lot of consolidation in every industry, not just in Web3 for sure. I think money's sitting on the sidelines waiting for more bodies to fall before they pick up on some things. I think there's some incredible consolidation happening in a lot of different spaces, which I think is exciting and quite frankly, I think needed to happen in the first place because I think there was just a little too much fat on the meat in all these different industries. I'm seeing a lot of people focus more on the infrastructure of Web3, a ton more focus on investing in AI. In fact, pretty much every deck that I have seen recently, whereas it once said blockchain on it, now says AI instead. It's like they just pulled that sort of replace word now and fit that in instead, which I find kind of funny because some of the decks have nothing to do with AI, but they just put it in there for fun. So while there is money, stalling, I would say, I think there's a lot more money out there to be spent, and they're being very careful about how that money is going out there. So I think it was about time that would happen.
Thanks. Jehan, you want to go next?
Hey, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, where we're, I guess, investment in kind of metaverse, I think, I guess what we're seeing in some of the funds that are out there and some of the rounds that are out there and founders, it still seems like people are biting around the edges and not really getting to the core of like what is actually going to sell or what's actually providing value. I think a lot of the ideas out there are still very kind of aspirational. Every now and then we still see some of these, kind of zombie projects floating to the surface where they're like, yeah, we built a metaverse, it's fully functioning. And of course, the natural investor question is great, looks nice graphics. How are you going to get anybody to go there? And, if Facebook can't figure it out, it's hard to imagine how, a 10-person startup is going to figure out that kind of go-to-market and that kind of product-market fit. So I think the biggest issue right now in Metaverse is that there is no product-market fit. There's nothing that people need or want to do there that's actually providing additional value to their lives that they can't get somewhere else. I'm pretty interested in the AR space and the kind of convergence of, the augmetaverse with the IRL verse, with the metaverse. I think that, one of the areas that we're going to see is how AR is able to bind or at least augment what also can exist in parallel with the metaverse. So we have a company in our portfolio called Matterless, and they have a protocol called Auki Labs. And it's actually just like a relativistic spatial protocol. And it allows you to basically place things in the real world. So almost like a Pokemon Go type of positioning system, but instead of GPS, it uses like a relative positioning system. But you can play AR games, in your living room. But these objects and these interactions can be blockchain based. So now you can take a car that you're playing, a car game that you're playing in real life with your friend on your floor with AR vehicles, and that can be an NFT that could just as easily coexist in the metaverse, sitting in your Decentraland, garage. So I think that these types of ways of taking IRL and the augmetaverse to provide value in the metaverse is one transition point. It's one way that we can, try and bootstrap the metaverse with actual value. It's still hard for me to see, how brands are going to be creating anything really important in that space that will persist. Obviously, there's still so many experiments. There's still so many, launches, but there's not a real persistent commitment to build in the metaverse. And I think that holy grail is figuring out like, well, what am I supposed to do here and when, and how am I going to make money or extract value from it? So I would give it still kind of like a timeline, perhaps 2 to 3 years before we really start to see really critical applications in the metaverse. But I think perhaps before that, we'll see different types of hybrid or different types of kind of on ramps into the metaverse before things really move over there.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense, and I think that sometimes it always depends on how we define the metaverse, right? Because if we take kind of an expansive view of the metaverse as digital experiences and including real world augmented experiences, I think there's tons of potential for enterprise use cases that I think is going to scale up significantly as the hardware really gets better. I think VR and AR hardware is quite behind some of the dreams and ideas we have for what it could be used for. But even in the last couple of years, we as a studio were working on a couple projects where we were designing almost identical VR virtual versions of high-end apartments in different places, and people could connect to VR headsets in different showrooms and whatnot, and actually or a 3D video, and actually experience an apartment that they may be in the US and the apartment may be in Singapore, but they're actually able to get that immersive experience before deciding whether to book the flight out there and really take a look at some of these higher value apartments. And so it was worth the investment. But I think with the advent of better hardware and AI and different technologies that make things like that more accessible, for example 360 cameras, we're going to be able to have those sorts of experiences and enable those types of use cases much more quickly. So I do think a lot of work is being done. I personally have seen some pitch decks of some incredible prototypes for what's coming in the world of AR and VR. And I know at CES, which happened recently, there were some really cool things being worked on the AR front to make that much more fluid. I think we're only going to see that increase. So I think what you're saying is totally true.
Sachi, what are you seeing in terms of investment interest right now, and what do you think is holding investors back?
Yeah, well, I can say that with Polygon Ventures, we're still actively investing. Obviously compared to a year ago, the number of projects in which we're investing in has definitely increased, but I feel as though post FTX, we're seeing a higher quality set of founders, which is great. I think the reality, if you look at the market as a whole, there's definitely a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines. Han Ventures back in 2022 raised, I think, about $1 billion or so. A16Z also raised like 1.5 billion in capital. So what I'm noticing with a lot of these projects is that, instead of like these big funds, instead of investing in like growth rounds, they're starting to focus on more like lower valuation projects, which as a result, in general in the market, like higher val projects, like up to a billion, like 500 million or so, the valuation has come down a lot for those growth stage rounds. But for like pre-seed, seed, early stage type investments, the valuation is still pretty high. So it's kind of tough because like I've seen some projects where they would be pre-products, um like basically they only have a team, and are raising at like crazy valuations. So for us, it's that has been tough to navigate. But I think in overall, like this bear market is actually good for the market as a whole, because I'm seeing the quality of founders increase a lot versus early 2022. And in general, the people that stay are the ones that are going to build something that is actually useful, and I think they're the ones that are going to drive innovation like going into the next bull cycle. So overall, I'm optimistic, and Polygon Ventures is still actively investing. So if you guys have any interesting projects or have a good idea, like feel free to DM me or message me. I'm happy to take a look.
Thanks, Sachi. Abdullah?
Yeah, so from our side, we actually got more and more interested in the metaverse NFT gaming landscape a little bit more well, towards the latter part of 2022. And part of it was simply because of valuations. And we were just very much turned off by a lot of the hype that was going into these projects. So, like right now, we're looking at both private markets and then public markets. A recent project we just started was going through the top 3,000 market cap tokens, dividing them up into their own categories and sifting out the BS from what's potentially, so we could potentially strike gold somewhere, because a lot of these projects that maybe raised money and launched a token, the vesting periods, they're over. The VCs have sort of, they've dumped the tokens, and the projects are sort of like in a limbo state. So there are a handful of those projects we've seen like on the secondary markets that we can potentially invest in. In the gaming space, it's really an absolute mess, because every project that sort of has a token, and if they're not straight like equity projects, if they have a token or an NFT, a lot of them are very quick to go to market. When you're iterating on these projects, it's very easy to take like a basic architecture from like a Unity architecture, and then put it in, just add some fancy graphics, do nothing about the actual game mechanics really, and start advertising it on Twitter. A lot of these small cap gaming projects have over 100,000 followers on Twitter. Actually, most of them do, and that's like the only activity you see. They have no like active users, but their Twitters are very active, so it's slightly deceptive. Um, so there's a lot of there are a lot of projects out there that are really quick to go to market, but they haven't created anything substantial. There are a couple of chains that are notorious for this, like BNB chain is very well known for producing a high quantity of projects, but the quality is very questionable. You can see if you look at like the dominance of users across multitude of different chains, you'll see that BNB chain, for example, doesn't have like a clear winner. They have a bunch of different projects that have a decent amount of market share, but if you look at other chains, there's a higher dominance for like a certain singular or like two projects that really dominate. But so when we're looking at these projects, we feel like it's really difficult to sift out what's going to work and what's not from an investment perspective, because some of these projects also only allow for like NFT investing. You're only able to invest in a gaming project if you own like an access token, or if you own like a character to enter the game. And from an investor standpoint, if those games are not offering any sort of equity, well, it becomes a little bit difficult to decide like how are we going to enter into this space. And I think that's going to set a precedence for future investing into like Web3/crypto projects. Like, are we going to use NFTs now? That creates a much higher degree of illiquidity. But when you have other protocols coming out, like NFT-fi protocols, they potentially could increase, the liquidity on some of these assets. So there are a lot of questions surrounding this. A lot of companies we've seen nowadays also are just going to a straight equity model, because they may have done, say, like an ICO a couple of years back. They have their token's not really, doing much at this time. The VCs have exited, and now the only way to sort of propel their project forward is through their equity. And that's like one of the red flags we saw so many times in the bull market. It's like, why do you need a token? There's no good answer to that question. And right when we when we don't get a straight shooting answer, we know it's a completely red flag. And even some of the best companies, started releasing tokens. There are some really good like auditing companies that actually released a token. We asked them why, and it just made absolutely no sense. So, there are different things we go back and forth in terms of how are we going to invest in these projects? Is it going to be through NFTs, tokens? Is it going to be equity? A lot of people are trending towards equity. A lot of investors are sticking through what works. But new models are being introduced, and we're just experimenting to see which one's most effective for our bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of salient points there, right? And I can speak kind of from how we're structuring our own operations. We began as a studio that serviced third parties and created metaverse assets. So when we were building, starting to build the game, we were obviously very familiar with the different things that we could reskin within Unity and within Unreal and kind of pump something out quickly. But, we were thinking from an intellectual property perspective that wasn't necessarily where the real value could be created. So, we've been working on our game for about a year and a half, and I think we've learned a lot through that. And I think there's certainly powerful things you can do to enhance a gaming experience from using all the different tools that are available, including some of these packages once you already have great assets that look really good. But I think when we've thought about how we're structuring our company and through Apollo Entertainment, the Satoshiverse for us is almost a proof of concept for a lot of this infrastructure that we're trying to develop. And I think at the end of the day, what's really surprised me over the course of the last year as an investor myself is the valuations that teams have raised on only because they have that hot IP, right? We've seen crazy 9-figure valuations on NFT projects that have, an 8 or 10 person team. And sometimes for me as an investor, I wonder, what's next? How is that valuation justified going forward? What infrastructure are you building to, service this wave of demand that we believe is going to be coming into the metaverse? Because I do think that there's real opportunities for the studios that are building games, that are building metaverse projects to establish an internal infrastructure to be that, artifact, right? I think that's the shining example in the Nike acquisition. Artifact, by the time they were talking to Nike, hadn't done a ton of actual work, but they had established the infrastructure. They had released some great art collections. They had done some digital stuff, and I think that mold is one that's going to be very appealing in the future when you start to see, retailers and IP holders who are really looking to accelerate their own capabilities look and say, okay, what have these studios, more than on a project basis, because they probably don't care about the IP, I think as much as people think. But if I'm Nike and I'm looking at who's done what, who has proven that they can, have all these capabilities, there's really only a handful of studios that are going to be out there to say, we have 3 to 5 years building in the metaverse space. We've done X, Y, and Z with blockchain implementation. We have, relationships with X, Y, and Z exchanges and platforms. And I think that from my own perspective, when I'm looking at companies to invest in, is something that stands out to me. Is what infrastructure have they built internally as a studio, because that takes a ton of time.
And Danny, do you have anything to add here before we move on to some individual questions?
Yeah, no, I think everything that everyone said resonates a lot with me. I think maybe one thing I can add just from my perspective is that I think I'm seeing a lot of just there is that macro like bearishness. There's a lot of worry. I think valuations, like concern over valuation and patience there. I think people are looking to get a bigger, better deal. And then I think we're also seeing just a lot of like zombie projects, vaporware, failed models. And that's, I think, also adding to the issues. But within that, I think we're seeing just a hyper focus on what is really going to work. And so within that, I think it's gaming. And that's biased, right? Because I'm just very bullish gaming and Ready Player DAO. That's what we're doing. But I think that's really what is the most exciting, and I'm seeing a lot of bullishness there, personally. And capital is still being deployed. It's just a matter of what for, and at what valuation. And so, to me, I see bullishness in addressing what we kind of mentioned earlier in this space, right? Which is, how do we get users? A lot of this stuff, I think our industry does get bogged down in tech. We see a lot of saturation in tech tooling platforms. A lot of that stuff doesn't get used, and will fail because there's no users. And so I think there's still capital being deployed in how do games and how do other projects get users? And those are social strategies. Those are people-based strategies. And so I spend a lot of my time doing that. We're working with a lot of games right now that we're really excited about that are coming to market. Working with them on how do we incorporate into their user acquisition strategies with what we've been building on the content and marketing side of things. And so I think there's a lot of pockets of very bullish things for the industry. And I think maybe one thing a lot of people don't talk enough about is like people-based strategies versus just focusing on the tech.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. All right, so getting into the individual questions. Our first question is to Sachi. So how do you view the role of the investment arm of Polygon Labs in growing the Polygon ecosystem?
Yeah, so I would say it's important to look at the history of Polygon Ventures. It was started about a year and a half ago. I joined right when, Polygon probably only had like 500 or so dApps. So at that point, we were really focused on investing in really good founders and really good projects because we believed that that would create a positive feedback loop. If there's really high quality projects that are building on Polygon, that in turn attracts even more high quality founders and more high quality projects to build on Polygon. So back then, I would say like we weren't just looking at valuations, but we were also looking like from a business development standpoint, how many users could this project potentially bring onto Polygon? So Polygon Ventures has been essential to growing the Polygon ecosystem. Now, we went from only having 500 dApps to over 50,000 or so dApps on Polygon. So, Polygon has really become kind of like a default option for a lot of projects to build on. So, in terms of investment strategy, we shifted towards, focusing more so like on like being more valuation sensitive. We only invest like small tickets. So ideally we want to focus on like pre-seed or seed type projects because we feel as though at that level we have more of an influence, and also more potential upside. So yeah, like I would say Polygon Ventures was essential to just growing out the Polygon ecosystem. We're more so like a corporate arm where we take into consideration, what's the potential value that this project could bring to the Polygon ecosystem, and not just from like a return standpoint. We take all these variables into consideration when making an investment.
Awesome. Thanks, Sachi. So before we move on to the next question, we're going to announce the winner of our 8Mo avatar for this week. So the winner is at Chris the Duckman. Congratulations. Please send us a DM and we'll make sure to get you your avatar. So the next question is to Abdullah. So Arana Ventures operates largely as a fund of funds for the blockchain space. How do you see the fund of funds model evolving in the blockchain space, and how are you positioning your fund to take advantage of new opportunities?
Right. So the fund-to-fund model compared to other models is, I will admit, a bit more boring. VC is obviously more exciting. Hedge funds are more exciting. But the thing is, the reason we launched fund-to-fund models was because our parent company actually is a real estate firm, and they do a lot of like commercial development just around the US. And so in order to get our like foot in the door into the Web3 space, because a lot of our LPs, a lot of our investors were curious as to how they can get some sort of their foot into the door into this space. And so we started this vehicle about a little over a year ago. And the idea was to create a mixed strategy where we can take like high beta and low beta funds and combine them into one model, all the while attaining as many new connections as possible in this space. So we interviewed over 100 funds in the blockchain space, a combination of like VC and like hedge funds, and we ultimately landed on a strategy where we started focusing on just entirely hedge funds, liquid funds, because one of the priorities our investors had was, they just wanted a high degree of liquidity, which again makes it difficult when you're investing in equity. Makes it a bit easier if you're a VC and you're investing in tokens because you have that liquidity advantage. But we decided we're going to prioritize liquidity and make this as seamless as possible for our investors. And we created like a portfolio of around 8 funds. And so half of these funds we call them just high growth funds. And these are the types of funds that during the bull markets, they grow between like 800 to like 1500%, and over the course of a year. And with our low beta funds, we just want to make sure they survive in the bear markets. Now, something interesting that happened was our low beta funds, which is in accordance with low risk. We realized those funds were actually a bit higher risk than some of the other funds, because one of our criteria for determining what makes a fund lower risk is one, just AUM, how much insulation do they have, how many connections do they have with like larger players, how well networked are they. So they have that, they have that cash parachute, they have that network parachute, they have social capital, and these are some of the criteria we use to assess the risk of a fund. And we realized that after FTX, a lot of these larger funds, a lot of these larger hedge funds were involved in that entire crisis, that entire loop, that debt spiral that sort of went through once FTX collapsed. And it all comes down to these funds like over leveraging and or not even over leveraging, but like giving out debt, being involved in like the debt cycle anywhere, put them at risk. And so some of these larger funds actually turned out to lose a lot more money, a lot more of their AUM, as opposed to some of the smaller funds, the higher growth funds that probably have like less than $50 million of assets under management. And the ones that had over $500 million of assets under management, those ones actually suffered a lot more from what we saw. So right now we're really reevaluating our structure to see how we can determine what is a proper fund, what is a transparent fund. We really want to start putting out models like, how can we look at the reserves? How can we start getting more insights as LPs into these other funds to see whether or not they're safe to invest in? So from a fund perspective, it's going to be even more curious from a regulatory standpoint, from a transparency standpoint, to see how we sort of invest in these guys. And so that's TBD. A very difficult question to answer right now, especially if you have like money locked up in some of these funds. But we're actively trying to reevaluate our strategies, and we launched our own vehicle at this point because a lot of the trust issues we've had with funds, they've arisen way too quickly. So at this point, we have like the fund of funds, and then we're just using a lot of internal capital just to make secondary market purchases at this point. So it's constantly under evaluation.
Thanks, Abdullah. Next question is to Danny. Can you please discuss the investment philosophy of investing as a DAO, and how investing as a DAO may differ from a more traditional VC approach in the crypto and Web3 space?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think fundamentally what we try to do is drive global adoption of Web3 gaming. We came together with that purpose and that mission. And so investment is really what was the order of the day. That's what the space needed to bootstrap itself in a lot of ways. And so our core was not to be a VC firm, right, or a fund. It's just investment is part of advancing a larger mission and purpose, right? And so I think dealing with that is it's a fundamental shift in perspective on what you're doing and how you're deploying capital and why you're deploying capital. And so I think there's that kind of fundamental difference from the model and our genesis there. And then I think there's also the collective consensus component of the mechanics of deploying. We don't have like a hyper standardized process that you would find in most traditional VC firms. We have a lot of VCs in Ready Player DAO, and a lot of institutional capital, and their processes are not our processes, right? We just decide things differently, so sometimes that can be slower. But we also get to leverage kind of the hive mind component, which is a benefit of our structure, and so we do give away a little speed in order to capture what are very valuable, diverse experiences in what is a very emergent space. And so, specifically with Web3, I think our model does afford us. I guess I don't want to say an advantage, but it positions us very well, because I think you have to have a collective of different perspectives. There's no clear model to invest in. I think we saw a lot of VCs really invest poorly, to be honest, right? Thinking that a Web2 model just put onto a deck at a high valuation would work. And, those things I think we saw just fail over and over again. And, a lot of our investments I think are well positioned. And I think that's a function of being a little slower, taking everyone's perspective into what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And so I think that's kind of maybe that's like high level, my answer there.
Beautiful. Thanks, Danny. Next question is to Lauren. So, given your background in TV and film, are you seeing any movement towards the industry using Web3 technology as a fundraising tool for films, or using NFTs to enhance the viewing experience for film and TV?
Definitely seeing both. I think on the marketing side, you're seeing a lot of movies that have already come out or movies that are about to come out using NFTs as sort of an additional layer of revenue coming in. I'm looking at a lot of different movies that are actually trying to structure and fund the movie, creating their own token or fractionalizing the film in a way that you can actually come in and take a piece of it as if you were a traditional funding producer, even if it's a tiny, tiny slice. And then I'm seeing a lot of very cool tools that are being developed to help generate the movie using AI. Sort of a more advanced version of ChatGPT, but attaching it to videos and 3D VR AR systems. So I definitely am seeing a lot of movement in that space. I would say traditional filmmakers don't really understand the blockchain space. They're used to making the movies the traditional way that they made them and getting them funded, either through your studio or through individual equity investors. And it's a very big leap for them to jump into having to learn about blockchain or tokens or any of the NFT strategies that people are using. But the ones that are trying it, some of it is a hit and some of it is a miss. But certainly there's a lot of people trying to crack that nugget. But Hollywood always seems to be one of those very closed door places that don't like to let new people in unless they come in the door, like blood in the water with tons of money in hand. But it is a very unusual thing to see it all kind of taking place at the same time, and watching the strategy of how people are trying to put movies together change over time. It's been kind of fun.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I was just at Sundance Film Festival, and talking to people about Web3 is definitely very mixed.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, directors and producers that I like to work with, they kind of look at me like I'm crazy and go, why on earth would I want to fund it that way when I can get it funded over here and I don't have to go through all 50 of those other ridiculous steps? And by the way, they're right. If they can get their movie funded the traditional way, they probably should. And I think that's why I personally haven't seen many like really extraordinary or big budget movies being funded in this way or even attempting to. Because they can just go the traditional route and save a lot of brain fry, I would say.
Makes a ton of sense. All right, to end us off, Jehan, Kinetic Capital has invested in some of the biggest names in Web3, like Yuga Labs, Immutable X, Animoca, Solana, just to name a few. So how does Kinetic stay on top of trends and get involved with such significant projects so early?
To be honest, I don't even really know anymore. We started back in, I started in the space in 2013. I started the Ethereum community, and that kind of gave me a lot of connectivity and just network. So I think was fortunate to just try and be helpful back then when things weren't worth as much, and built up a lot of goodwill, which I think I'm still, kind of benefiting from. But beyond that, a lot of projects just come to us. We're fortunate to have a really good network. It's interesting. I was actually just preparing for this. I was looking at my email back in February of 2018 is when I first met Anatoly from Solana. And I can't remember how we met, but I must have just met him at a conference or someone introduced me. And he kind of struck me at that. That was back when the project was called Loom Protocol. It wasn't even called Solana. And we were just lucky to, encounter him. And sometimes you just have to know when you're lucky and kind of lean in. And I would say more than anything else, we've been in significant projects because we've been super willing to be wrong. We've been super willing to get knocked around and kind of get back up. I mean, we're fortunate to be seed investors in Solana, but we're also seed investors in FTT and, BlockFi and, Luna, right? So, you take your hits and you just got to keep going. And I think it's that, keep swinging is how you get into significant projects because, you remember the significant projects, but there's a lot of insignificant or a lot of projects which didn't make it that are kind of on our track record as well. And we own those and we're still willing to kind of swing. I would also say because we're not a venture fund per se, we don't have outside capital. We operate as a family office, so we don't have, to answer to anybody in terms of LPs. That gives us a lot of flexibility again and, buffer to be wrong and to just, take it on the chin and keep going. I think that if I had LPs and I had to report to them and I had to justify, every little whim and kind of gut instinct, we probably would be more constrained than we are. It's the fact that we are, our own capital that we can take extremely out of the money bets. And, hopefully those are the ones that win. The stuff that we're doing with, BSN, which is China's national blockchain infrastructure initiative, that's super controversial and super out there, very untouchable for a lot of Western VCs and traditional VCs. But we can swing at it because, we just, have a hunch that China and blockchain is going to be a big thing. So that's kind of how we see things. And I think we've mostly just been lucky and a little bit smart and a little bit bold.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. Nick, do you want to close this out?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for everyone who joined. It was really, really informative and a pleasure having you all here. I think as a developer in the space and an investor myself, I think the role of the investor is what's going to truly make what's a dream for many come true. And we're going to be able to see real progress over the next 5 to 10 years because of the investments that people like you have been making for the last 2 to 3 to 5 to 10, right? So I think that, kudos to all of you. Such an important thing you're doing. Thank you for being here and sharing your insight with all of us. Thank you to everybody who joined and listened, and to everybody who's going to listen to the recorded version in the next couple of days. Really great chat, and we'll be back here on next week on Tuesday. So if there's anything that any of you want to close with, anything you've got going on, usually we have more projects on here, so there's usually something going on. But if there's nothing going on, thank you so much. Please feel free to reach out anytime with anything. That goes for the community too. My DMs are open. And yeah, thanks again, and look forward to chatting more in the future.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.